Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, BethChatsBooks. Now today I was planning to do a tag video, but I've been trying to search for tag videos, and as I was going through my subscription feed I realised that people aren't really doing tag videos at the moment, and I couldn't find one that I was really excited to do. So I decided I'm going to do something a little bit different today, and I'm going to do a bit of a recommendation video for some recent television and TV shows that we've been watching, because previously I used to do this a lot on the channel. I used to recommend TV and films and things that I've been enjoying and did some favourites of the month, and in the last year I haven't done any of those kind of videos, not because I don't want to create those videos and not because I haven't been watching things, but because it's just been hard to consistently film as things have got busier, and as you kind of get into your routines with things, it's just been quite hard. And with COVID, I was working the whole time, so I didn't actually have any free time in which to pursue more video making. So I think now's a good time to just recommend some programming that I have enjoyed throughout COVID and lockdown and quite recently. So this is going to be my top 10 TV recommendations during lockdown. So the first one I want to mention is The Great British Bake Off. So we are on week 4 now. It has returned to us finally. I know that the contestants have all had to isolate in a bubble together to be able to film it this year, but I think it's the perfect thing that we need on TV at the moment. It's fun, it's playful, it's a little bit competitive, and it's getting us out of the rut. I know a lot of the American and Canadian viewers also really enjoy the Bake Off. I believe it's on Netflix, available in those countries. So this is our most recent season that's out. It's got Prue Leaf and Paul Hollywood as the judges, and then it has Noel Fielding, and this year Matt Lucas is the new addition as the two sidekicks that kind of interview the contestants throughout the programme. So we're up to week 4, which is Chocolate Week, which I haven't watched yet, but we've had Cake, Bread and Biscuit Week, all the classics at the moment. No characters are kind of jumping out at me this season, whereas usually by this point I have my favourite. But we'll see how it goes. I just think it's fun, light entertainment to watch, so I couldn't really do this video without mentioning that. And then my next recommendation is A Suitable Boy, which me and my stepmother were watching on BBC iPlayer. This is an adaptation of a book by the same name by Vikram Seth, and it follows the main protagonist Lata, who lives in India, who is trying to find a match to marry. So her mum is really interested in her finding a suitable boy to marry. So it follows romantic tropes of potential suitors, and throughout the programme we see her engage with 3 or 4 particular suitors until she finds the one that she wants to marry. Well, it was going down a very Romeo and Juliet storyline at the beginning, because Lata falls in love at the beginning of the novel with a Muslim boy, but she is a Hindu woman, and obviously culturally there's a lot of tension between those two religions, and it was a no-go. She couldn't pursue a romance with him. So it was tantalising all the way along whether she would choose him, but then a few other suitors come into the mix, and I'm not going to spoil it for you about where it ends up. I also really liked in the background it talked about the Hindu-Muslim divide culturally in India. It talked about the British colonisation of India and their influence on Indian culture, and it's just the beginning of the novel is set in the 50s and 60s, about them gaining independence and moving forward, and what that meant for India and how complicated that is culturally in India, with the different religions and the different caste systems and the politics. So that was really interesting in the background of the programme. I think Lata was a very interesting character, very effervescent and very bright, and a character that all the other characters seemed to gravitate towards. She had an energy that was very warm, and it was just nice programming if you like escaping to somewhere else, a different culture. There's a lot of other things that go on. There's a little bit of a mystery in the middle of it as well. So it was very well done. I think a lot of people have given this criticism for presenting a very Anglo-Indian depiction of India, but this is set in the 50s in a very different time period, and there is a lot of complications that go along with Britain's relationship to India, but I did think it was an enjoyable watch. I really enjoyed it, so I think it's still on BBC iPlayer for all of the people that live in the UK if they want to go and check it out. And then the next one I want to talk about is Riviera, which is on Sky Atlantic, and today, as I'm filming, season 3 is launching on Sky Atlantic, all the episodes. So we watched as a family during COVID season 1 and 2. So this follows the Kleos family, and there is a main protagonist, Georgina Kleos, who is the wife of Mr. Kleos, who at the beginning of the programme we find out dies, and she is a much younger model, and so the ex-wife, the original wife, comes back into the equation with Kleos's death, and he has 3 children. And we learn he's very wealthy. This new wife he has, Georgina, is American, blonde, pretty, has inherited a lot from him, and it seems she will inherit a lot of his estate, his art and his wealth. And it takes us on a journey that's quite dark and twisted, and I won't really ruin it for you, but there's a lot that goes on, more than meets the eye, so it'll be interesting to see the next instalment of that and see where that goes. The finale episode was a little bit, and season 2 a little bit disappointing as a family, so we're really confused where they're going to go with this series now. And as I've seen from the advertisement for the new season, it seems like a lot of the main characters in the first 2 don't seem that present in the advert, so I don't know where we're going with that, but it was something that we did quite enjoy watching during lockdown. And if you're into fast pace, there's a lot of action, gangster crimes and criminal activity, and then if you're into those kind of things, and also it's quite glitzy. Riviera is a really expensive place to live, and it's got the glitz and glamour and the nice outfits, and maybe a little bit like Killing Eve and sprinklings of that a little bit. The main protagonist, Georgina, is quite similar in some ways to Villanelle, but not as intense as Villanelle, and obviously not as murderous. But yeah, I would recommend that. And we also watched during lockdown Des, which was an adaptation based on the crimes of Dennis Nielsen, who is a very infamous killer in the UK. So during the 70s, Dennis killed 15 young men. He was a gay man, and he went to the gay clubs in London and found the homeless and the drug users and the very vulnerable in gay clubs, and he asked them to come back for a drink at his flat, and then he killed them and mutilated their bodies and tried to dispose of their bodies in very grotesque and horrendous ways. So he's a very infamous killer, and he gets found out because the drains get clogged in the flat that he lives in, and they find human remains, and it starts us on this whirlwind horror story of finding out what happened to these 15 young men. So they never were reported missing because they were usually homeless, drug addicted, very vulnerable in society, and people didn't notice they'd gone missing. So then it became for the police to figure out how did these 15 people go missing and die, and nobody ever know. And Nielsen was quite infamous because he was quite open from the beginning to admit his crimes, to show them the crime scenes. Most killers don't really tell you straight away, admit to the crime and show you all this, and Dennis became a bit of an oversharer. So it goes through arresting him and then what he says and then his trial, and it's loosely based on Killing for Company by Brian Masters, which I recently read, which was where Brian visited him in prison and compiled his history and the history of the crimes and trying to piece together why Nielsen committed these crimes. So David Tennant plays Dennis Nielsen, and I think he did a fantastic job. It's a very difficult role to play, being a serial killer, and it's very disturbing. Dennis Nielsen's crimes are incredibly disturbing, so I know it was a particularly difficult role for David Tennant to play. and he has come out in interviews since and said, "I'm very glad that Dennis Nielsen is dead and was not alive during the filming of this, because he wouldn't want to kind of inflate his ego by the fact that there was a TV programme about his crimes." So it was very intense watching. I think it's a 3 or a 4-parter. Fantastically done. I think it's still on ITV Player for the people that live in the UK. I would really go and check it out if you didn't, but I'm sure everybody in the UK pretty much went and watched it while it was out. It was very, very hyped at the time and everybody was talking about it, so it was very, very good. And I also want to recommend, also from ITV, Honour, which is the adaptation of the crime in which Banaz Mahmood was killed by her father and her uncle in an honour killing in the UK, and Keely Hawes plays the detective who ultimately gets the guilty verdict for both the dad and the uncle, and then subsequently goes to Iran to find the other 2 gentlemen who were responsible for her death and bring them back to the UK and put them on trial and find them guilty. So she was an incredible woman. What was so heartbreaking about that programme is how many times Banaz would come to the police and say, I think my family are going to kill me, because she divorced her husband, which was culturally a no-go, and the gentleman thought it was the honourable thing to kill her for her sins, and she kept coming to the police station warning them multiple times. They have video recordings of her with interviews in which she said, I think my family are going to kill me, and nobody did anything. So that was a very harsh look at the British police. It was very hard watching to see how she had been let down, a very vulnerable young woman, and it ultimately resulted in her death. Very, very hard to watch, but very important. And I know that Keely Hawes has come out in interviews since she did this programme, and I said this is the hardest thing she was ever involved in, and she felt very distressed by this story and it impacted her a lot. So I think that was also 3 or a 4-parter. That was very intense as well, but very, very powerful, and I would really recommend you go and watch it. And then on a lighter note, I also watched during lockdown RuPaul's Drag Race Canada version. So this is the first series for Canada of the RuPaul's Drag Race, and the 3 judges for this series were Brooklyn Heights, who is a Canadian drag star who was originally in the RuPaul's Drag Race US edition, and she came second in her season. And then we have Stacey Matthews, who is a Canadian model, and Jeffrey Bauer Chapman, who is a model and actor, I think. I don't really know, but he's also Canadian. So they're the 3 main judges. I got incredibly invested in this series, which I didn't expect. I think it was because it was lockdown and everything was really weird and I wanted a major escape. So I got too involved in this series. I became obsessed with the top 3, and I was really heartbroken when the person that I wanted to win didn't win. So I was putting all bets on for Scarlett Bobo to win. She was the one I wanted to win, but unfortunately, spoilers, she didn't win. But I thought they were really interesting in this series. They had kind of a more brashness than the US contestants, but not quite as brash as the British, but this middle ground of a bit more bitchy and sassy than I anticipated, particularly because Canadians have the stereotype of being very friendly, but they were very bitchy with each other, and they had this sarcasm and this attitude that was a bit more playful than some of the US versions, because some of them, the US versions, have been quite stilted in the recent years. So I found it quite refreshing, and it was just a good chunk of drama that was pointless, like all reality TV is, but it's very engrossing in the moment, particularly when you're living through COVID and there's nothing exciting to look forward to and you just want to be immersed in someone else's pointless and sassy drama. So I loved it. I think it's still on BBC iPlayer. I know that they're doing a first series of RuPaul's Drag Race in the Netherlands, but I don't think it's on BBC iPlayer or anywhere in this country can I access it, so maybe they might put it on Netflix at a later date. But I'm obsessed with RuPaul's Drag Race and have watched every series and watched all the All-Stars, and it's my guilty pleasure, but I am absolutely obsessed, and I just find it's funny and sassy, and I love how they dress and perform, and critiquing their outfits and their performances, and then it's also got this undercurrent of emotion of all of these young boys who've come to drag to be accepted, and it's just a beautiful art form, and it's a fantastic culture that they create, and it's just nice to watch it and be a part of it. And it's my guilty pleasure. I know people have things like Bridget Jones's Diary, or Love Actually, or S Club 7, or Spice Girls, or something that everybody's kind of got a guilty pleasure that they just know it's silly, but it's fun and it's entertaining and it's something that's special to them, and might be corny, it might be cheesy, but you just love it. And RuPaul's Drag Race is that for me, 100%. So I would recommend. Then the next one I want to talk about is Better Call Saul, which is on Netflix. So this is the prequel to Breaking Bad, and this follows Jimmy McGill, who becomes Saul Goodman, who is the lawyer in Breaking Bad. We have now watched 5 seasons, and apparently they are currently filming season 6, which will be the wrap up to everything and make sense to everything that leads on to Breaking Bad. But we have really loved this series as a family. Over these 5 seasons, I have really invested in Jimmy McGill's life with his partner in crime, Kim Wexler, and Jimmy's relationship to his brother Chuck, and becoming a lawyer, and his ups and downs, and his issues with the drug cartel, and all these weird situations he gets himself in, and how he manages to get his way out of situations with his big gob, and his planning and plotting, and just the way it's structured is so clever, because the introduction of characters, and then how you second guess how they are in the series or out of the series, or where they come to be in the grander picture. The way it's sculpted is incredible. I've never watched something that has such an intricate way of pacing something, but that it fits. There's never any time you're watching it where you think, well, that's inaccurate to what happened. And it's made me want to go back and watch Breaking Bad, because I don't really remember a lot of Breaking Bad, but the good thing about this series is you don't need to know a lot, because obviously it's before that period of time, so it doesn't really try and test your memory on that too much, which is good. But it's made me want to, after this, maybe go back to Breaking Bad and see the world again, because it was so clever, Breaking Bad, and the whole world fell in love with it. And I think I tried to race through it too much, and I don't remember if I finished the very last season of Breaking Bad, so I feel like maybe I should take my time, because I know it's on Netflix, and go back and reappreciate it maybe. But we'll see. But it's fantastic, Better Call Saul. I didn't know how they were going to string it out for 6 seasons, because when you watch the first couple of episodes, a bit like Breaking Bad, it's very slow paced, but it gives you a really good payoff. So if you're patient enough, it will reward you and you'll become sucked into the story, but it doesn't give you the instant gratification of hooking you from the beginning, which I really liked about it. And it flips between different time zones. At the very beginning, we see Saul in the Cinnabon in the mall, and then we'll see that, and then we'll go back to periods of time when Jimmy was younger or before him and Chuck's relationship takes a twist, and then after we learn about when he becomes a lawyer and other bits. I don't want to spoil it, but the chronology is always a bit back and forth, and it's just cleverly plotted. We've got season 6 and things are coming to a head, and I'm quite nervous and excited to see where that goes. But if you haven't already invested in it, I really would. I know a lot of people have watched a few episodes of it and found it a bit slow, but it really, if you are a Breaking Bad mega fan and you want to know everything about that world, it really will give you that context through Jimmy of really framing the story properly and seeing all the components of it. So very impressive. We've also been watching on the Sky Crime channel I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which is based on the book I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. Now this was really interesting because I read I'll Be Gone in the Dark a few years ago and really enjoyed it. I think Michelle was a fantastic writer. And this series shows Michelle from when she became interested in crime and started her crime blog in 2007, 6-7, around that period of time, to then becoming obsessed with the crime of the Golden State Killer and trying to find him. So she became obsessed. She got in contact with local police, she went through files, she spent a lot of time blogging about it, and then she got a book deal which became I'll Be Gone in the Dark. However, just before publication, she was probably 70% of the way through the book, 80%, she died. And it was quite sudden. She was taking a lot of medication to help her sleep. She was taking Adderall and Xanax and a lot of other very strong drugs, and the cocktail of the drugs resulted in a premature death. They found out from her post-mortem that she also had an underlying chronic heart condition. Probably it didn't help with her death, but they couldn't say it ultimately was the cause of her death. They believed the cocktail of drugs she was on was the reason. So it's very tragic. But her use of drugs were predominantly to help her sleep because she was becoming that obsessed with the case. She was reading some horrific things and had access to crime scenes, and it was all very disturbing, and it was to help her push through. Post her death, the last chapter, her husband Patton, who's a famous comedian, helped formulate the ending with help from her editors and from some of the police that she was speaking to. So the series really goes through the lead up to her writing the book and why she became obsessed with the case, and then the last 2 episodes really focus on the fact that a few years after her death they found the Golden State Killer through DNA, and so it was the bittersweet look at the fact that what Michelle had been working all her life for, and particularly the last few years of her life, towards finding the killer was not in vain, and that was done. So it was a bittersweet look at Michelle's purpose and ultimately the demasking of the killer, the finding out the identity. It also goes through some survivors of the Golden State Killer's rapes, because he was also known as the East Area Rapist, and he did over 50 rapes before he then committed murder. So some of the series is taken up with interviews from women who survived rape from the Golden State Killer, and the last episode has a reunion of some of the survivors, so it's looking at all these different angles. It was very Hollywoodized is how we described this series. There was a lot of effort of having Michelle's voiceover reading sections of the book. Now I was really interested to know where they'd got that from. Had she done voice recordings to put it on the screen? Is that why they had the vocals? Maybe she had written through a recorder. I know a lot of writers sometimes will take recorders out with them, and then when a sentence comes to mind they'll press play and just speak into it so that they don't lose it. So I don't know whether that's where they got that from. That had a creepy edge of her almost reading her own words from beyond the grave, which was poignant, but then some bits of the programme were very Hollywoodized, and I think it's a very delicate line to take, because listening to the survivors and hearing their story, there's a fine line between allowing them to talk about their story and seeming to exploit them for their story. But it was really interesting to see how Michelle was very significant in helping them find the killer, that she'd put a lot of man hours in that became very useful. But the last episode there was some very dramatic music and this symbolic stripping of a room at the end that I thought was an artistic choice maybe by the producers and the directors of the programme, but really was overkill. So I don't really know what the series was achieving that the book didn't in some ways, but I know the addition of them speaking to the victims was really poignant and really hammered home that point. Go and watch it and make up your own mind about whether it was good. If you read the book and enjoyed it, then I would definitely watch the series and see how that compares. But I think the book was better, and it was obviously nicer because you were in Michelle's world through the book. Majority of it was written by her, and you got that sense of what a talented writer she was, and what a shame it is that she isn't here. And obviously she left behind Alice, her daughter, and that's a very sad tragedy. But her words are immortalised forever in the book, and they are very, very beautiful, particularly the last part of the book, which is a letter to an old man, which in the series they read out as well, and the words are very powerful and emotive. Yeah, it's a fantastic book, so I would recommend reading the book as well. And then the next one I want to talk about is Pose, which a lot of people will have heard of. Now, I know in the US, I think season 3 is already out, so here in the UK on Netflix, we've only been given season 2 recently. So this follows Blanca, who's a transsexual, who enjoys the underground ballroom scene. So in season 1 it was the 80s, the late 80s, and then season 2 starts in 1990 when Madonna releases her very famous hit Vogue, which brings the underground club scene into the mainstream for the very first time. So transsexuals and gays and LGBT members that have been performing in the underground clubs for the past decade are now recognised through Vogue with their significant Vogue dance moves and their drag makeup and their categories and their judging. So season 2 really starts with showing how the underground scene was starting to become recognised in mainstream, but also the issues that they faced. And the subplot that runs through the season as well is about the HIV epidemic and how the rise in HIV and AIDS cases across America was devastating the population, the gay community in the US, but also significantly this was happening in the UK, and it was also happening overseas as well on a global scale. But obviously the community in New York City was hit very hard with HIV and AIDS, and a lot of the characters test positive, and it's about them coming to terms with that and trying to preserve their life and trying to find meaning. So it's got this very sad undercurrent, very hard storyline. And HIV and AIDS is just such a horrendous illness, and it's devastating, and it just ravages people's lives. And there was a lot of gay shaming because of HIV and AIDS. And what's wonderful in Pose is that Blanca and a lot of her family in the gay community and in the trans community, they call the head of the house the mother, and they have this traditional family setup because a lot of people would be made homeless and thrown from their houses and extricated from their families because they were gay. And so they create this family. So Blanca, as the head of the family, is trying to teach the transsexuals and the gays who live in her house, Angel and Damon, how to care for themselves, how to exercise their rights, and to learn about safe sex and things like that. So it's a very heartfelt programme, and it has the fun elements of them all dressing up for the ball scene and the competitions, but also the really hard reality that a lot of them were living with HIV and AIDS, and how that puts an intensity in all their relationships. So very, very hard-hitting, very poignant, sad, but also hopeful. It's just a really feel-good programme, and I absolutely adore it. And I can't wait till season 3 comes out. And then the last one I want to talk about is I Hate Susie, which is on Sky. And this follows Billie Piper, who stars as the main lead in it, but she also helped produce it, I think. She also had some kind of involvement in writing it or producing it. And this follows Susie, who was a child star who then gets picked up by a reality show and becomes famous. And then at the start of the first episode, she's having people into her house to do a photo shoot when she finds out a video has been leaked of her in which she's performing oral sex on a man who is not her husband. So that adds a spanner in the works. So then we learn that Susie is straddling the line between fame and how to stay famous and how to keep being famous and relevant. But then we learn through Susie the undercurrents of that, how she is a very messed up character. She puts a lot of emphasis into how people see her, and she's very egotistical, and she's not very good at controlling herself. She over overspends, she does a lot of drugs, she's quite aggressive sometimes, she's not all that she's cracked up to be, but she's desperate to remain famous and to get the next deals, and her agent turns out to be her best friend, who's kind of her moral compass as well. What I found really interesting with this programme is how funny it was. Billie Piper did such a fantastic job, because Susie's not really a likeable character, but that's the point. We are meant to look at celebrities and we envy them, but underneath all the crap that she has to deal with that comes with being famous makes her unlikable. She doesn't get to spend enough time with her deaf son, she's not that interested in her husband, she's had this affair, but there is a good character underneath. There's just somebody who's been through the difficulty of being a celebrity and never really coming to terms with it, and particularly people that are found and become famous at a young age really never find a coping mechanism with fame, because their identity was being shaped by their fame from a very young age. So I think those people are the most messed up, so Susie really embodies that. But there's so many funny bits even in quite dark parts of the series. I thought it was really good. The way it's ended definitely means there will be a second series, so I'm very excited for that. But Billie Piper did an amazing job. She was just fantastic in this. I couldn't stop watching her. I think her teeth are beautiful as well. I just couldn't stop watching how beautiful her face was all the way through as well, which, you know, I just kept thinking, yeah, her life's a mess, but look how pretty she is, which was not the point of the programme, just to reinforce that. But it was really funny, really well structured and paced. I didn't really even till the end see what was going to happen, and it's been left very open, so I'm sure there'll be a second series. But I really loved her best friend, who's her agent. She was a really fantastic character as well, so I can't wait to see where that goes. So that's it. That is my top 10 TV recommendations for during the lockdown period. Obviously we're not in lockdown now, but with this tier system we don't know what it's going to be like, so equally if you have to have a few days of isolation, these are some TV programmes that I would recommend you binge and check out. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with a brand new video. Bye now.